You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
Okay, welcome back to the show. You're listening to WRKO's The Hard Truth with John Deaton. I am John Deaton, and thank you so much for listening. Listen, something big happened over the week. A bombshell has occurred, got dropped in the form of a book, and that book is called Original Sin, and it is the decline of President Biden, the cover-up, and the disastrous choice to run again. That's the name of the book, and it's written by CNN's Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. And what they do is they interview about 200 people who were in the know, mostly Democrats, they say, who wouldn't tell them while Biden was running, but now they're all giving up the tea and they're spilling the beans. And my reaction to them is shame on them. Shame on them that if they knew that the president of the United States was incapable of being president, then they had a duty. They took an oath to defend the Constitution, to serve America, and they were a coward and they didn't come out. But here's what we have to learn, okay? We have to learn that you can't trust what these media folks say. There's a saying on X, and it's, you don't hate mainstream media enough. And I'm going to prove to you why you don't hate mainstream media enough and why you can't trust what these people say. And we're going to start with Joe Scarborough, who calls himself a small town, a small government Republican conservative. Well, listen to what he had to say. He basically wanted us to believe that Joe Biden was the most unique human being to ever live, that Joe Biden actually improved over time, that his memory improved over time, that he got better. The older he got, the better he got. That's what he wanted us to believe. In fact, he told everyone to F off if they didn't believe that. Check this out. This is crazy.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth.
F you if you can't handle the truth of what Joe Scarborough's going to tell us the truth is. What is the truth, Joe?
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
She knows so long as she was 9.
In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been.
President Biden has a photographic memory. His understanding and mastery of
photographic memory. He's better than he's ever been. The best version to ever live, this Joe Biden.
A complicated geopolitical situation. Remarkable.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
Jackie, are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here.
I was sitting, 2 feet from him across the table, and he was, intense.
Have trouble walking sometimes? Yeah, so did FDR. He wanted GD war.
But he's totally focused. He's very sharp.
They say he's sharp in meetings and so on.
Very lucid, very well informed. Biden is stately, and he comes with gravitas. There hasn't been, as far as I know, a single claim that Biden made a mistake.
Ageism is an issue.
Wait a minute now. When you start questioning what your own eyes are seeing, they're going to now call you, you say that they call you a racist if you say that the border needs to be closed. Well, now, if you see a man who's clearly deteriorating and you call it into question, they're going to say you're an ageist, right? You're engaging in ageism. You're a bigot against older people. Check it out.
Americans have a rich history of holding people's physical characteristics against them. Okay, you can ask African Americans.
He's older. That doesn't mean that he is unfit, and there's a lot of ageism there.
Now, this age attack, this obsession by the right.
Joe Biden may not be able to speak for himself the way that he used to.
They want to think to take on government if we get out of line, which they're talking again about, and that's him lying around.
I think people should be speaking up for Joe Biden.
Americans and reporters in the media are just judging him by a physical appearance, and it's horribly unfair. Age is an asset.
He showed exactly how with it he is.
The flip side of this coin is that he has a tremendous amount of wisdom and experience.
Oh, they're flipping the script now. Your eyes aren't telling you the truth. He's actually wiser and smarter than he ever has been before.
Have you heard any concerns from anyone who has met with President Biden about him seeming a little slower?
No.
More wild speculation from a bunch of people who have probably never been in a room with Joe Biden and certainly don't have medical degrees that I'm aware of.
You don't get paid for performance to be president. The job is not a job of endurance. I don't see Donald Trump out bike riding like Joe Biden.
It's the Hillary's email. All they have is that he's old.
He can clear a dementia bar, and that's probably a win.
The media are not fair, and they're getting less and less fair, and things are frightening. You have Wall Street Journal running a horribly sourced piece saying that Biden is unfit.
Now you got the media attacking the media because one outlet actually started questioning Biden's mental awareness.
Dubious Wall Street Journal report about the president's acuity.
Shoddy story by the Wall Street Journal questioning Biden's mental fitness.
Wall Street Journal story had a lot of flaws, as you said. But Sinclair, they didn't do any original reporting. They didn't follow up. They didn't do any work.
The hero of the day is Hersh Goldberg Poland, and still, he is not here with us, but he's still being held by Hamas.
But a huge part of the Mueller report talks about Russian disinformation tactics. And one of the themes this election cycle is that Joe Biden is too old to lead. And so everyone is seizing upon this. And it is a classic disinformation tactic.
And then they go back to Russia is planting the story and planting the seed. Don't listen to your own eyes or your own ears. Listen, this is one of the biggest scandals of my lifetime, bar none. And the reason for that is look at the outrage that the Democrats have had over Elon Musk. Elon Musk, they keep yelling. You see him, Pelosi and Schumer and AOC, they're outraged. Elon Musk is unelected, and look what influence he has. Well, at least it's out in the open. The question here is who was in charge while President Biden was president? Who was in charge? We don't know. Who were the unelected people? I told you in a last episode that we live in the corruption era, and this is an example of the corruption era. Unelected people addicted to power who will do and say and cheat and lie and steal to keep that power. This is an outrage. The reality is Kamala Harris, shame on you. Nancy Pelosi, shame on you. Chuck Schumer, shame on you. And you want to know what they're doing now? Chuck Schumer was interviewed and he was asked about this book and he said, oh, we're just looking for the future. We're just looking for the future now. That's all we're doing. We're not going to talk about it anymore. They want to pretend that it didn't happen. And I'm going to end this segment with just how crazy the media is and how crazy they flip-flop. And it's Jake Tapper himself. This is the same guy who wrote the book, Original Sin, talking about Biden's cover-up. Jake Tapper. Listen to what he had to say about Biden and his obvious mental issues when Kristi Noem raised it. Check this out.
How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
It's very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You are
to watch somebody on stage search for
that's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Did you hear that? By Jake Tapper, the guy who wrote the book, Original Sin, who is uncovering this massive cover-up, was actually the guy who was saying that there's no evidence, that he's mentally sharp. He was complicit in the cover-up, and now he's selling books about the cover-up. I'm telling you, We live in an era where there is no integrity anymore, and it's one of the reasons why I started this show. All right, when we come back, we're going to have a special guest, someone who is running for governor. He wants to retire Maura Healey and be your next Massachusetts governor. Stay tuned. Come back. The Hard Truth is paid for by the Deaton Law Firm. I've been representing mesothelioma and lung cancer victims for 23 years across the Commonwealth. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer and were exposed to asbestos, you contact me at the Deaton Law Firm. That's DeatonLawFirm.com. You can also reach me here at this show at thehardtruthshow.com. That's John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. All right, so this segment, I'm going to call it Trump Watch, because it seems that there's always news that's driving people crazy, especially on the left. Trump said this, Trump said that. And many of you know out there that I haven't been the biggest Trump supporter in the world, that's for sure. And a lot of people out there in the Republican Party were disappointed about that, about me. But listen, he's the president of the United States, and the majority of Americans voted for him. He not only won the Electoral College, but he won the popular vote. And as an American, as someone who has served his country and wore the United States Marine Corps uniform, I have to root for my country. I have to root for my president to be successful. And so as a part of this show, we will always be on Trump Watch. And I have to tell you that something that is undeniable, even people on the left have to concede that this last week has been historic for the United States and for President Trump. What's undeniable is the success in the Middle East. President Trump visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. This trip has been monumental. It's been a monumental success. Even the critics, the people who watch Trump's every single move and criticize him at every single step, have to admit that this trip was a success for America, for jobs, for investments. And if it's good for America, then I'm going to support it, and I'm going to praise it where that praise is deserved. And he deserves praise for this Middle East trip. Welcome back to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Listen, you can reach the show with your comments or questions or concerns or even criticisms. Reach me at john@hardtruthshow.com. That's john@hardtruthshow.com. Big update. So, the biggest scandal, arguably, of my lifetime, politically speaking, has just went down. Now, last time I talked about the book Original Sin that Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, they wrote about how the Bidens covered up his health, the leading Democrat politicians covered up his health, how the media, including Jake Tapper himself, covered up Biden's health. But we just learned, just a day before the book's official release, that Joe Biden comes out and says that he has stage 4 prostate cancer that has metastasized to his bones. That he just got diagnosed. He skipped stages 1, 2, and 3 and went straight to stage 4 with metastasization to the bones on a disease like his that normally is a slow progressor, which means that as president of the United States, Walter Reed and all the greatest doctors in the world that treat our presidents missed this slow progressing form of prostate cancer. It's all BS, and you know that. Listen, let me tell you, you can even look this up on artificial intelligence. The chances of a healthy 80-year-old man getting stage 4 prostate cancer that goes into his bones within 6 months, the chances of that happening is 1 in 10,000 if you're talking about the general population, you or me. But he's not the general population. He's the president of the United States. He has the best health care in the world. Walter Reed is a renowned, incredible medical facility. But they want you to believe that in 6 months, this otherwise healthy 80-year-old man is now going to die soon. And obviously, people are saying because of sympathy for Joe Biden, well, let's not talk about it. No, we have to talk about it. I wish Joe Biden well. You know, obviously, I'm a survivor of cancer. I represent people who have cancer, so I understand. My heart goes out to him and his family. But you're the president of the United States, man. And you had this disease before you ran for president in 2020. That's a fact. That's a medical fact. People say I'm speculating. No, I'm not speculating. In fact, let's listen to what Joe Biden said a couple years ago, 3 years ago. Listen to this.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
That's why that's Joe Biden saying, that's why I and so many others have cancer. That was on July 20th, 2022. So he knew he had cancer. He was being treated for cancer, and that was kept from all of us. And the real issue here is who was in charge? Who was calling the shots? You know, the Democrats and the left can complain all they want about Elon Musk or about Donald Trump, this or that, but at least you know who's in charge. At least you know who has influence. We're talking about people that are unelected bureaucrats sitting back pulling the strings. It certainly wasn't Joe Biden, and they knew that, and shame on them. We need an investigation into what happened, who knew what, where, and when. And Joe Biden and the rest of them, they need to release his medical records, because I guarantee you that in the last 10 years, there is a PSA test that is very elevated, that is suggestive of prostate cancer. And I guarantee you they looked into it after that. And so it is a huge scandal. We can't let them off the hook. And we've got to have transparency as we move forward. Okay. And so, you know, that's the reality of the situation. My heart goes out to President Biden, but we're not going to let him off the hook. He had a responsibility to the American people. He let us down, and the people in charge, all these leading Democrats, the Chuck Schumers, the Nancy Pelosi's, Elizabeth Warren, all of the people who were watching Biden behind the scenes, they lied to you, they misled the American people, and I hope to God that you remember it on Election Day. The Hard Truth is paid for by the Deaton Law Firm. I've been representing mesothelioma and lung cancer victims for 23 years across the Commonwealth. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer and were exposed to asbestos, you contact me at the Deaton Law Firm. That's DeatonLawFirm.com. You can also reach me here at this show at thehardtruthshow.com. That's John at hardtruthshow.com. Listen, let's check into the Karen Reed's trial. When I've watched the first episode of that documentary, I got to admit, I kind of thought she was guilty. You know, she's not a very likable person. She had no sympathy, it seemed, for the man that lost his life, who seemed to be like a good guy, a good cop who, you know, adopted his sister who died's kids and all of that. And there just seemed to be this complete lack of sympathy for the man. Of course, she is on trial for murder, but after that first episode, I thought, I don't know, I think she did it. Plus, she was saying things like, did I hit him? Did I hit him? Could I hit him? But then when you see the evidence and you learn more of the story, it is very difficult to see the government getting a conviction in this case. I mean, listen, the first mistake that the government did, and I used to be a federal prosecutor, so I charged people. The charging decision is a very important decision. And what the Commonwealth did is they charged this woman with second-degree murder, which requires malice aforethought. It's a specific intent crime. And it means that you have to develop the specific intent to do bodily harm to another human being. And you want to know what is a defense to a specific intent crime? Intoxication. Voluntary intoxication is a defense. You can say that I was so drunk, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was so drunk that I didn't mean to hurt him, I didn't mean to hit him. And so why the government chose second-degree murder is beyond me. Had they charged her with voluntary manslaughter and then tried to plea bargain it down to involuntary manslaughter, maybe she would have taken the deal, maybe she wouldn't have, I don't know. But that was the biggest mistake that the prosecution ever did. Now listen, there's so much reasonable doubt, in my opinion. The injuries on the arm look like dog bites. I have a dog. I've been a dog lover all my life. Trust me, those look like dog marks. And then you learn that the owner, Albert, got rid of his dog the day after O'Keefe lost his life. And then you learn that Albert renovated the basement right away, twice. And then he sold his house under asking price right away. Why? You got to start asking yourself that. And then you ask, why did he just stay in the house when a fellow cop was dead, or at least near death, on his lawn? And why, when you look at O'Keefe and the fact that he didn't have certain clothing on, that looks like someone who would be in the inside. Why didn't they go in that house? Why didn't they do fingerprinting? Why didn't they look for blood spatter evidence or any of that? None of that took place. That all leads jurors to think that there's reasonable doubt, even if you don't like the defendant, right? You have to ask yourself, are you prepared to send this person to prison, potentially for the rest of their life or for 25 years? And so when you look at Jen McCabe and her inconsistencies, and you look at the fact that the Alberts and the way they acted, I mean, why would the man, and I'm talking about Albert, after he gets rid of the dog, after he changes his basement, after he sells his house, he also drives and he destroys his phone and the SIM card. That is not behavior of innocent people. It is behavior of someone's consciousness of guilt. So I have a very difficult time imagining the government is going to get a conviction of Karen Reed in this case. And here we are in the middle of the case, and what does the government have to do? They have to go to the judge and say, oops, this timeline that we set out, that we opened the case about, that we told the jurors was the accurate timeline. Well, now we have to alter that timeline. And all of that's fallen apart on the part of the government. And then just this last day, some issue came up, and the judge spent the entire day or morning talking to each juror because of some issue that we're going to learn about soon. So listen, this case is falling apart fast for the government. I will be absolutely shocked. And let me tell you something. When the jurors write a judge who is presiding over the case a note that says, can you stop sustaining all of the objections of the prosecutor because we think it's unfair to the defense, and plus we want to hear what these witnesses have to say, that's a juror signaling to you that they're on the defense side and they think that this defendant isn't getting a fair trial by the judge. So, that's my update for now. If something changes, I'll let you know, but you can write it down right now. The real question is, will this be a full acquittal where 12 jurors agree to not guilty, or will it be another hung jury? I'll let you know as we move forward. All right, folks, welcome back to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. I got a very special guest with me. This man hopes to be the next governor of Massachusetts and retire Governor Maura Healey. Brian Shortsleeve, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, John, great to be on, Marine, and thanks for your service.
Absolutely. First thing I have to say is hoorah, devil dog.
Hoorah.
You know, I got to tell you, I saw your commercial, you know, on when you announced Brian, and as soon as I saw that young, hard-charging, handsome Marine serving his country in that uniform, I got to tell you, it tugged at my heart. So thank you for your service. Thank you for being a Marine.
You and I went through officer candidate school in the summer of 1994, as I recall. Although we didn't know each other then, we were there at the same time. So Marines get the job done. First in, last out, no excuses.
No, absolutely. And it's a small world because we didn't know each other back then, but we were in Quantico, Virginia, in training. So listen, obviously I told the audience here on WRKO that you're running for governor. They probably know that. So the first thing I want to do, instead of me getting into your bio, and you don't got to tell us why you're running for governor yet. We'll get back to that later. But who is Brian Shortsleeve? Why don't you tell us? Introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, John, look, I'm a Marine, first of all, spent 4 years as an officer in the Marine Corps after college. I'm also a businessman, and I believe that we need a businessman in the corner office of this state. Businessmen like you and I, we live in the real world. We got to balance budgets. We know how to create jobs. We know how to build jobs. And I believe that is desperately needed in the corner office right now in Massachusetts. And then finally, I'm a father of 3 young boys, and I care a lot about their future. I want them to grow up, and I want them to build their families and chase their dreams and build companies like I have. And I want them to do it in Massachusetts. And I really fear if we don't get this state on a different track and send Maura Healey packing, that our kids and grandkids aren't going to have the same opportunities that we have.
Right. Well, how old are your kids?
I've got a 6th grader, an 8th grader, and a 9th grader. And they're good. They're great guys. And, you know, they love Massachusetts and they love their lives here. And I just want to make sure that, you know, that they're going to be here the rest of their life. As you know, I mean, there's 500 people a week leaving Massachusetts right now. We got to turn that around, and we got to turn this back into the growth state it once was.
Yeah, Brian, we know you served in the Marines, and thank you for your service. Why don't you give us a little snapshot of your post-Marine Corps service, what you've been doing before you decided that you're going to be our next governor?
Right. Well, I got commissioned back in 95, deployed to Bosnia on a peacekeeping mission with NATO in 97, then over to the Persian Gulf with 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit in 98. Then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went straight back to Harvard Business School. I always was interested in business, always wanted to own my own company, really had a passion for entrepreneurship. So when I got out of business school, I've spent most of the last 20 years of my life working with small companies, helping them become big companies. So we at M33 Growth are a firm that invests capital in smaller companies to help them scale up and grow. It's a great part of the economy, John. You know, in Massachusetts, 60% of the people that work in the state work for small businesses. It's 100% of the growth in this state. I'm talking small businesses with, you know, 20 to 30 employees that are in niche markets, trying to scale up, trying to grow, trying to get medium-sized or get big. We do. And I've always, you know, loved the entrepreneurial world and really enjoyed my time in the private sector.
You know, you've been talking already about the private sector. So I want to share something with you on screen. You see that?
Well, I'll tell you, John, it's a stunning, stunning chart you're showing me.
And can you, just so the audience, obviously on YouTube, they can see this, but on WRKO, our audience, what is this chart showing?
This chart shows private sector job growth or loss over the last 12 months. And what this chart shows is that Massachusetts is dead last in America right now on private sector job growth. In fact, over the past year, per this chart, we've lost 12,000 private sector jobs in this state. Let me tell you why the private sector is so important, John. The private sector is what drives growth. The private sector is what drives innovation. If you want to know if a state is a good place to do business, look at private sector job growth. If companies are growing and people are coming, it's a good place to do business. If your private sector is shrinking, as it is in Massachusetts, what it means is it's not a place that people want to come and do business. And I would say this is the result of Governor Healey's failed policies. You know, since taking office, Healey ran in 22 on the largest tax increase in state history, which passed. Since that time, she's proposed numerous new taxes. just this year to include a tax on candy, a tax on prescription drugs, a tax on security corporations, even an end to the charitable deduction, which is effectively a tax on charity. So when I look at all those failed policies, it's a combination of driving up cost, driving up expense for small business. If you talk to small business owners, they'll tell you their number one issue is taxes, and their number one two issue is the cost of electricity. And under Healey's failed policies, our electricity bills are up almost 30% over the past year. And most of that growth is not due to the cost of the core electricity. It's due to all the state mandated fees that Healey and her team have jammed into your electricity bill. So when it comes to getting our private sector growing again, we got to cut taxes, we got to cut fees, including those state mandated fees, and we got to get state spending under control so our private sector can begin to grow again.
You know, I pay attention to Governor Healey and her behavior and her posts and things like that. And I don't know if it's a coincidence. You may have an opinion on it, Brian, but since you announced your candidacy, I've seen this kind of pivot from Maura Healey, where all of a sudden she's acting or trying to act fiscally responsible. And so I've got to ask you, how do you convince voters that this is pretend, this is election kind of time, hey, I got to pivot and try to act more common sense, and that we're not going to see Healey 3.0 if she's reelected?
Well, John, I announced my candidacy on Monday, and I got up Tuesday morning to see Governor Healey announce that she was going to start cutting back those state mandated fees on your electricity bill. And she acknowledged failure. She acknowledged it was a failed policy. She acknowledged it's driven up costs. She also acknowledged that there's not much evidence to demonstrate that there are outcomes related with the dollars that are being spent. I'm a businessman. I understand return on investment. I would go through every single line item in our state budget to include those state fees. And if we're not getting a return, they shouldn't be there. On Wednesday, she also announced a hiring freeze. And this is a governor that just 3 months ago announced another $4 billion of new spending and 5 new taxes. Her admission on Wednesday that the state needs to rein in expenses, the state needs to position itself for a different outlook in revenue, I think it's another acknowledgement of failure. I mean, since Healey took office, she is spending over $1 billion more on the state payroll. The Boston Globe reported she's hired over 3,000 employees. She's also spending, as of last count, $3 million a day on the migrant crisis. That's another $1 billion a year. $1 billion here, $1 billion there. It adds up. And the result is that we've got state government has grown almost 20% since the day she took office. Yet our private sector has shrunk. And this is you are showing right now on the screen, the Boston Globe calling for a wake up for fiscal sobriety and talking about the fact that Governor Healey, since the day she took office, has done nothing other than ramp up state spending, ramp up hiring, ramp up spending on migrants, and also ramp up your utility bill. And the result of that has been a really marked decline in our private sector vitality here, to the tune of 12,000 jobs over the last year.
Yeah, explain to me, and you see this in the federal government as well in Massachusetts, the public government service should not be your highest growing sector. Would you agree with that?
You know, government doesn't create jobs. Government doesn't drive innovation. The private sector drives innovation. Entrepreneurs drive innovation. Maura Healey has no one to blame but herself for out of control state spending and skyrocketing costs. She has no one to blame for herself for the cost of the migrant crisis. And this acknowledgement Wednesday that we've got to batten down the hatches and get state spending under controls is, frankly, it's $1 late and it's $1 short. Over the past 2.5 years, Governor Healey's increased the state budget by $10 billion annually. That's an enormous amount of spending. And there's no amount of revenue, frankly, that's ever going to catch up with it. What you see is it's crowding out the private sector. People are leaving Massachusetts. Students are leaving Massachusetts. Businesses are leaving Massachusetts. But it doesn't have to be that way. If we cut taxes, we cut fees, and we get spending under control, we can get this state growing again the way it was for most of the 2010 to 2020 timeframe.
You've described yourself as a businessman. You've obviously been in the private sector. You're obviously a very successful individual. What's the steps you would take? I know you just outlined, do you think you can get these businesses to come back? Because they are leaving Massachusetts.
Well, let me tell you, Massachusetts needs a rescue mission, John. and it's going to take a Marine to take back Beacon Hill. I'm an optimist. Look, I'm in the venture capital business. I'm always betting on the future. So I believe we can turn things around. Businesses are telling us why they are leaving. They're telling us, and they're telling us they're leaving because taxes are too high, because electricity is too high, because the regulatory burden is too high, and because unemployment insurance, UI, is too high. Those are things we can absolutely address. And if I was governor, day one, a Governor Shortsleeve across the board would be looking at cutting taxes to get small business moving again, create a better environment to work here, cutting fees, including all those fees you see on your utility bill, but then most importantly, getting spending under control. This is a state with an outlook in revenue growth that probably is to the 1% to 2% per year range. That's what the likely revenue outlook is. Yet we've got a state budget growing at 8 or 9%, and the result is that Healy has been consistently proposing new taxes to fund these spending plans, and the result of that is it crowds out the private sector and it makes it a place too expensive to do business. So I think we can bring back a lot of people. We can bring back a lot of businesses. It wasn't too long ago that we were the fastest growing state in the Northeast. It wasn't too long ago that we led in terms of new business creation. But we've got to get refocused on the cost of doing business. We have to make Massachusetts affordable again for families and for businesses. If we do that, we'll bring people back and we'll bring businesses back.
All right, now we're going to go to break, but let me tell you, I'm going to ask you've been talking a lot, Brian, about your Marine Corps service. So I'm going to ask you when we come back from break, what did you learn in the Marines that you think basically gives you the necessary leadership skills to turn Massachusetts around when we come back? All right, thank you for listening. We're back at the Hard Truth with John Deaton. I have Brian Shortsleeve running to be your next governor of Massachusetts. Let me ask you, obviously, I'm biased. Everybody knows I'm a Marine. You're a Marine. You're my brother before I even met you because you wore the greatest fighting force uniform ever in the world. But what did you learn, Brian, in the Marine Corps that you think translates to leadership in government?
Well, John, Marines are the first in, they're the last out. They get the job done, no excuses. So it's really my experience as a Marine that shaped who I am and how I think. The most important lessons I learned about life and about leadership, I learned in the Marine Corps. The core values of the Marine Corps are honor, courage, and commitment. Marines are taught to work together as a team to accomplish a mission. In my case, my mission was to go to Bosnia with Marines to execute an aerial reconnaissance plan to support the U.S. Army. When I went to the Persian Gulf, it was to support 15th MEU. I believe when it comes to state government, it's going to take a mission-oriented Marine to get into that corner office and really go to work on the reform that is required. What I don't see from the current governor is a plan. All right, as a Marine, you have a plan, you execute it. My mission day one, if I was Governor Shortsleeve, we would be focused on cutting taxes, cutting fees, getting spending under control. That's what we would do. We would wake up every morning and think about it. We would go to bed every night and think about it. I think with that level of intensity and focus, which you get as a Marine, you can get the job done. Reforming government is hard work. Driving reform in public agency is hard work. I've done it. I spent 2 years driving a really aggressive reform program for Governor Baker back at the T that delivered the lowest operating expense in decades, the first balanced budget in more than 10 years. I know how to do it. I know how hard it is. I used to put my flak jacket and helmet on every morning to go and do that job. But I tell you what, after 2 years, we had reformed systems. We had stripped waste out. We had rebid contracts. We had restructured contracts. We'd streamlined headcount, and that operation had the first balanced budget in a decade. We can do it in state government, but it takes a businessman mindset, an outsider perspective, and a Marine's determination to drive reform in state government, because there's a lot of internal forces in state government that want to retain the status quo. And generally, my experience in state government is it's a very large and insular, sort of slow-moving bureaucracy. So it takes a Marine to challenge that bureaucracy and get things moving. I know I can do the job.
Well, I got to disagree with you on one thing that you said. You said that Maura Healey doesn't have a plan. But I think her plan is to reverse course action on everything she's done. I'm sure you've noticed it as well.
Well, I got in the race on Monday, John, and I called for cutting taxes, and I called for cutting fees, and I called for reducing those state mandated utility bill fees that you see, and I called for reducing state spending. So just this week, on Tuesday, Maura Healey completely reversed course on her failed policies around energy, and she announced that we need to cut those fees back. We need to take those state mandated fees off of your bill. She acknowledged that many of them probably are not generating a return, but they're costing people a lot of money. They're killing affordability. And on Wednesday, she announced the state hiring freeze, which I would say is too little, too late. I mean, this is a governor that has hired 3,000 people and increased the state payroll by over $1 billion, who's now waking up to a hiring freeze. What it tells you is these policies are not working. These policies have been a failure. And a Governor Shortsleeve would be moving the other direction, which is to start to really restrain spending, cut taxes, cut fees. And we've got to get Massachusetts back to the point where it's a competitive market, where we're bringing companies into the state.
You know, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, Brian, and you know, you make a strong case. You're obviously a Marine. You're likable. You have this business sector. You're sort of matter-of-factly. You're a formidable opponent. And so I'm already sitting here thinking, what's she going to do to attack this guy? And I think all she's going to do is play the Trump card. So what's your strategy to overcome that? And do you think the Trump factor is an issue?
Maura Healey loves to complain about the current president, John, but she didn't do very well under the previous president either. Look at her record since 2023. Most of that time, Joe Biden was president, and her record has been a record of failure. It's a record of failure around the economy. It's a record of failure around affordability, and it's a record of failure in terms of containing state spending. I mean, the state budget has skyrocketed. It's completely unsustainable. I believe this issue, this race is going to be about the future of Massachusetts. This race is not about Washington, D.C. It's not about the president. It's about the future of this state. And Maura Healey will do everything she can to talk about anything other than her record since the day she took office in January of 23, which I would argue is the most anti-business record we've seen in decades. I mean, this is a state that was the fastest growing state in the Northeast for much of the 2010s to 2020s. You just showed me a chart showing that over the past 12 months, we've actually lost private sector jobs in this state. If you go back to January of 2023, that's 2.5 years. If Massachusetts was just keeping track with the national growth in jobs, we would have added 85,000 private sector jobs, just keeping track with growth. Economy's growing, the world's growing. Yet here we are. And since the day she took office, the growth in our private sector jobs has been minus 5,000. So we've lost 5,000 jobs over 2.5 years. Just in Q1, and this came out in the Globe this week, the Massachusetts economy contracted by 1.1%. That's 4 times the national average. Think about that. In Q1 of this year, our economy contracted at 4 times the national average. And why is it? It's lagging job growth. Lagging job growth is the reason that we're trailing the economy. The rest of the world is growing. Jobs are growing. Yet since the day she took office almost 2.5 years ago, instead of adding 85,000 jobs, we've lost 5,000. And that's not a record that she can run on. So I imagine she'll focus on national issues in Washington, D.C., and she'll focus on political grandstanding. I'm going to focus on what's right for the people of Massachusetts and getting our economy back on track and getting our private sector economy growing again.
Let me ask you, how do you tackle the immigration problem here in Massachusetts?
You know, who would have known that Massachusetts is a border state? Yeah, here we are, well into 2.5 years into her time as governor, and per the facts that she put out this past week, we're still spending $3 million a day on the migrant crisis. It's about $500 million over the first 9 months of the year in direct shelter. It's another $80 million in the home base program, of $40 million in temporary shelter. That's $3 million a day, John. For that amount of money, about $1 billion a year, you could give every city and town in this state $7 million of local aid. And there's a lot that cities and towns could do with that local aid for their police department, for their schools.
And we've seen 2 hospitals fail. You know, Neshoba Valley Medical Center in Central Mass, where I'm near, it's one of the 2 hospitals that was, if something happened to my family that I would use, that one's gone. Dorchester, Kearney Hospital in Dorchester closed. And Maura Healey's position was, there's nothing we can do about it, that her hands are tied. Yet you just said, what was that figure? 7 million to each town?
We're spending right now $3 million a day. That's $1 billion a year. With $1 billion a year, you can give every city and town in this state $7 million in local aid for what we're spending. So it's a question of priorities. My priority as governor would be delivering for the people of Massachusetts. My priority would be Massachusetts citizens. It would be cities, towns. It'd be local aid. Maura Healey's priority continues to be funding a migrant crisis, which she could have worked quickly early on, like 2 years ago. She could have reformed the shelter system. She could have reformed the rules around the shelter law. I mean, the shelter law came in 1983 under Governor Dukakis. It was designed for American citizens, generally women from battered families who needed temporary shelter. Everyone agrees with that. That's a good policy. It was never designed for what it's being used for now. Yet Maura Healey consistently has refused to make the big, bold reform. She's also not doing universal background checks. If we were doing universal background checks and folks in the system, we'd be picking up people that have been convicted of crimes in other countries. We don't do that. You know, she's doing Corey checks. So I believe in a variety of ways that it's been too little, too late.
You know, when I asked you about the Trump issue, and she's going to try to tie you and the Republican brand to Trump, you made that incredible good point that how was Massachusetts doing when Biden was president of her party?
And the answer is, John, not so good. All right. Not so good. Go back to January of 2023. That's 2.5 years. The state's lost 5,000 private sector jobs. It should have gained 90,000. So I would say Healey's record was as bad from January 8th of 2023 to November of 24 as it's been since then. It's time for a new governor. It's time to put a businessman in the corner office that understands how to balance a budget, understands you live in the real world, knows what it takes to create jobs and build jobs, and can be out there rolling out a red carpet for businesses to come here. Back in the old days, we used to have something called the Business Development Pipeline in Massachusetts. Governor Baker used to talk about it. It was all the companies that wanted to come here. You probably remember that. Companies like GE, there was a long list, and they'd be talking about negotiating with incentives. You don't hear much about the Business Development Pipeline in Massachusetts anymore because there isn't one, John. Businesses are leaving. They're not coming here. And you're going to need a businessman in the corner office to turn that around.
Listen, we got about 2 minutes left on this segment. Thank you for being here. You know, give us the elevator pitch. Why should the voters start being excited about the idea of not just getting rid of Maura Healey, but of Governor Shortsleeve?
I'm a businessman. I'm a father. I'm a Marine. I can drive the change we need in this state to get us growing again. We can get our private sector moving again. We can bring companies here. We can reverse the flow of people out of the state. And this is a state that, you know, we love. I got 3 young boys. I want them to grow up here and raise their families here and build businesses here. I know we can do that, but it's going to take someone with my background as a private sector business builder and Marine to get the job done. So please, if you're interested in supporting me, join me. I'd love the help. My website is www.brianshortsleeve.com. We're getting a great response out there, and I look forward to meeting many of your listeners in person over the coming months.
Give that one more time.
It's www.brianshortsleeve.com, and we would love your help. Join us in the mission. It's a mission for Massachusetts, a mission to make the state more affordable, mission to get the state growing again.
Thank you, Governor. Brian.
Thank you, Marine.
Thank you for taking the time, brother.
Well, thank you, John. Good luck with the show. Great to see you today, and I'll see you soon.
You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.